Why is it not starting? Let me check. I'm 95% sure I turned on auto start. Oh, it is okay. We're on? Okay. All right. Well, can everybody hear me out there in the side chat? Am I coming in? Because I'm not. It's not started on my phone. It still says upcoming on my phone. Oh, never mind. There it goes. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back. Sorry we're starting late. I got off work late, and then my computer decided to have some problems, which it always does. So, Okay. So joining me today, we have our favorite host and co-host, Peter.
Who also had difficulties because before you joined for the first time, my internet cut out. And I thought, oh, wait, did we have this a few weeks ago already? But it reconnected immediately, so probably just a glitch.
Well, good.
Let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, you and me both. And we also have Nestlig, who is one of my editors, who's also joining us today.
Hello.
Well, hello, welcome.
And I used to say I'm glad to be back, but this time I am worried.
So I'm gonna get a hot take. I'm gonna do a hot take right off the bat, and it's this: Joe Rogan is hit or miss for me. He's not Satan, but he's also not, a towering intellect. For the most part, he smokes weed and asks celebrities if they've done DMT. Right, that's his show. That's his appeal.
For a minute, you had me scared that you were going to say he's also not Jesus. Okay.
Well, every so often, I've seen a few of his shows, and if it's someone interesting like Lawrence Krauss or Neil deGrasse Tyson, I watched Bernie Sanders, Matt Taibbi. I don't hate his show. Oh, he had Richard Dawkins on. Remember that? I don't hate his show. It's fine when he has like normal people on, and then every so often he throws in just a absolutely loony off the wall person like Robert Kennedy Jr., who we talked about in a recent video. And now he's continuing that pseudoscience kick by inviting an intelligent design proponent on. That would be Stephen Meyer. Now, Stephen Meyer has become something of the front runner for the Discovery Institute. First, it was William Dembski, who's dead now. And then it was Michael Behe, thanks to Darwin's Black Box, which he wrote in the late 90s. Behe doesn't do as much stuff anymore. It's Meyer now. Meyer's the one writing books, giving talks and lectures and things.
Well, we don't know. So we do have the clip in the intro where he's trying to be a car mechanic. That is from his video. Maybe he's taken up a whole new line of work. You never know.
He's like Ian Juby. He's doing the train spotting now.
Yes. I mean, on tracks where there are no trains, which I still find fascinating. Train spotting on disused tracks.
You gotta look really hard, Peter.
Well, it's pretty much like making videos for Jesus, right? Not that anything is going to show up while you're doing it.
Yeah. Smitty makes a good point. I thought he was good at arguing against deregulation to Dave Rubin. That's Rave Dubin. That's pretty funny. Rave Dubin. He actually, there's a really good clip of Rogan talking with Candace Owens, because Candace Owens is a grifter. I don't know if she believes anything she says, but let's assume she does. Depraved Dubin. You guys are ridiculous. And Candace is saying like, oh, I don't believe in climate change, and Joe's like, well, why not? And she says, oh, well, like, I can't remember what exactly she says, but something about like, well, I've done my research, and he's like, but all the experts in this field accept climate change, and there's all this evidence for climate change, and she's just like, oh, well, I don't believe that. Something like that. It's like, actually, so he does push back sometimes. He doesn't just uncritically accept everything. However, in the RFK Jr. Discussion, I think he kind of let RFK control which website.
Oh, Nestle.
Whoa.
Nestle, mute.
Oh.
I'm not sure what's happening. I think Nestle is being electrified or something.
Is it better now? Is it better now? Sorry about
yes.
that.
Yeah, that's good. Better.
I don't know if Candace Owens believes what she says. Frankly, it doesn't, I guess, matter all that much. She still spews garbage. But yeah, so he pushed against her. And then he pushed against, he let RFK, allow him to go to a website that was run by RFK. So when he was like, when Joe said, "Oh, you have evidence that cell phones cause brain cancer? Can you show me that?" And RFK Jr. said, "Oh yeah, here, go to this website," which was RFK's website. So,
Trillmix said, trying to be John Pendleton. Sadly enough, John Pendleton is no longer with us. After I think 3 years, I finally got in touch with him on Facebook, and he sent me invites whenever he did some group hangout to update people on his upcoming experiment to catch a pterodactyl. And he never did that on the same time, so I missed all of the invites. I never got to be there, and I desperately wanted to have him on my show talking about how things went, because he asked for, I think, $5,000 it was, to cover all the expenses. That was including the wages for 2 people who were going to be there 24/7. Pig, I recall, and a bucket of pig's blood. No, a small goat and a bucket of pig's blood, and some other things that he wanted. Yeah, and he had rented a field and made an enclosure in the field, because obviously, what would a pterodactyl do if it came into that field? Fly away or something? I mean, obviously a fence is going to keep him in.
I mean, yeah, he was definitely like multiple tiers of crazy. But yeah, he's also passed now. Yeah, Smitty's right. RFK Jr. is a very high-ranking crazy person. Yes. So if you have the fortune of not being born American, then you may not have heard of RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is I think it's the nephew of former President John Kennedy. However, RFK is also trying his hand at politics. I don't know what exactly he's run for in the past. I don't remember. But what I am familiar with in his background is an organization he runs called like the Children's Health Defense, which is an anti-vax website. And that's where he gets his renown, is being a major anti-vaxxer. He denies it. If you ask him point blank if he's an anti-vaxxer,
there were several clips on Twitter.
Evidence.
There were several clips on Twitter today where he was questioned about his weird remarks.
Yeah, he was at Congress, wasn't he?
Yeah. So they asked him about, and I won't say the name. They asked him about a certain practice that happened in Europe between 1940 and 1945. He used to compare everything related to a certain vaccine to that, and then he said, "I never said that." And then they quoted him.
Yes.
And he said, I never said
Yeah.
that. And he also said, I'm not anti-vax. Wait, you're not? You're good at hiding that.
So, we put a clip in from a some I don't remember which newspaper it was, but we put in the video we did on him where one of his
Yeah, I saw that.
spokesperson
Yeah.
is asked, is RFK Jr. Anti-vax? And they say, no, he accepts some vaccines, to which the journalist says, well, which vaccines does he accept? And they go, well, so it turns out I was watching a video recently. I think it was Vosh. I think it was a clip from Vosh where RFK says he accepts some attenuated virus vaccines. However, he immediately follows that with, but they do more harm than good. So according to him, even the ones he considers working still are more harmful than good, which is insane. We had a reputable epidemiologist who has actually contributed to the research for one of the COVID vaccines. That's a friend of ours of the channel. We had him read over our script to make sure that it was good and everything. And RFK's crazy. He's just insane. It boggles my mind that he's a Democrat when he's not. Unlike most things, he's like the way to fix climate change is like free market capitalism, which, the only thing that like he's like on the left about is he says like reparations need to be made to like African Americans and Native Americans, which okay, sure, all right, but other than that, pretty much everything he's like right wing on, so it's very strange. Anyway, yes,
it's also strange, like if the anti-vaccine thing used to be more left wing in like a decade ago.
Yes, it was more like kind of like tied to spiritual sort of stuff and like being like the healthy living sort of stuff. And then following Donald Trump's election, it immediately swung right wing. So there's that.
Yeah, but Jackson,
anyway.
you know the climate change isn't a thing. The fact that the hottest temperature ever recorded, the record that was broken 3 times last week, that's purely coincidence.
I don't know, Peter, if you've seen the meme. It was from Fox News. It's one of their hosts who says liberals blame climate change for a heat wave, and it's like, yes, question mark. Anyway, has Jackson become woke and got an endorsement from Joe Rogan? What? I think you're backwards. I think he hates woke. Immutable. Joe Rogan is anti-woke. I am the woke one here. Anyway, all right. Well, we spent enough time jabbering about it. We ready to jump right in?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Sure.
All right, let's get to it then.
Okay.
Let's dive in the.
Sorry, folks.
The
before we dive in, I want to do a prophecy. Guess what we're going to be doing next month? Probably still the same. It's 3 hours long. 3 hours, Jackson.
It's going to be a lot of content.
How could you do this? Okay.
Once we finish this, we'll go back to Discovery U. We'll finish our class. So
we're going back to better pseudo nonsense. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It is great to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I've really enjoyed watching some of your videos online and listening to these arguments.
It's muted.
This idea of intelligent design. My question to you, like right off the bat, was: is this?
Can Peter hear us? Oh, there he is.
There is no audio.
No audio.
Oh, my bad. Hold on. I shall fix this momentarily.
And then we go back. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Let's try now.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It is great to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I've really enjoyed watching some of your videos online and listening to these arguments. This idea of intelligent design. My question to you, like right off the bat, was: is this an idea that did you have a notion in your mind already that you were trying to prove, or was this something that you sort of started to believe upon the preponderance of evidence?
It was more the latter, but I had by the time I first encountered it, a philosophical framework that made me open to it. I had a long, protracted religious conversion from late high school all the way through college. It was the last thing from a Damascus Road experience. And
how did it happen?
It was a process of philosophical deliberation. It was not really based on science initially. I started having weird existential questions when I was 14 years old after I'd broken my leg in a skiing accident. And questions like, well, what's it going to matter in 100 years? There's this great quote from Bertrand Russell where he says, that all the noonday genius of human achievement is destined for extinction in the vast heat death of the solar system.
Whoa.
I had never encountered Bertrand Russell as a 14-year-old, but I later encountered that quote, and I thought that was what was bothering me.
That dude was a scorcher.
Yeah. Well, I read in the hospital after I had this accident. I was reading a book about the history of baseball, and I was totally into baseball at the time. I couldn't think of a higher form of human achievement than to play for the New York Yankees.
Oh.
And yet all the stories of the great baseball guys ended the same. They were recruited by scouts who saw their talent. They came up to the big leagues. They amassed records. They won a certain number of World Series. And then, if they were really great, they go to the Hall of Fame and retire at 38. And then what? And then I got to thinking, well, but then what for any of us, And so I was this question of meaning kind of haunted me. What could I possibly do that would have any lasting or enduring meaning?
And then he got paid 6 figures to write about intelligent design.
I did a physics.
Yeah, spreading pseudoscience is something that's really an achievement. That's a great goal.
What is life about? You'll pay me how much to say that? Okay, sure, yeah.
Money.
I can lie to people and make a mark. That's a thing.
Yeah, Jesus.
Major and a geology major.
For anybody who's, for all of you watching, we have not watched. I don't think any of us have watched this in advance, so we're all watching it for the first time.
Nope.
Yes.
I haven't watched it.
So Neppy Crows brings up an interesting point. Actually, when he brought on Dawkins, he seemed to Rogan seemed to agree with Dawkins on atheism. So it's kind of interesting that a few months later, or a year, however long ago it was, time isn't real, that now he's like, intelligent design, very interesting, whatever.
I think he is being less pushy because he wants to put up a show. Like if he was negative the whole time, and it would not go anywhere for him.
I guess that's true. That's true. And like I said, we haven't seen this. I have no idea if Rogan entertains intelligent design. He might later on just beat the crap out of Meyer. I have no idea. We haven't watched this yet, so.
Well, in all fairness, for Joe Rogan, it does have the word intelligent in it, so it's probably a good thing to have on your show. I mean,
in college, but I took as many philosophy classes as I could along the way, and I encountered
because Meyer's a philosopher by trade,
who were asking these same types of questions, and realized, as a 14-year-old, I thought I must be insane to be having these questions. And I worried that I was insane. It was a real funk I was in for 6 or 8 months. And then later I
worry
realized,
about
these were
that too.
Philosophical questions. And for me, the religious conversion I had started to address and answer those questions. So I was by the time I got out of college, I was a convinced theist for philosophical reasons. But I had, at that point, I was completely comfortable with the evolutionary explanation of everything. And then at a conference that I attended,
I have to jump in. The evolutionary explanation for everything. Everything? I mean,
I see what he's saying. Let's be real. He uses Darwinism to refer to evolution, so he's not great with words, which is kind of ironic for a philosopher, but whatever.
The first
And he
thing that
also
comes to
probably,
mind, the first thing that comes to mind when he says everything is Owen's 6 versions of evolution. That's my first thought. By the way, should we send dear Mr. Hovind some well wishes, because he's not well.
Oh no, darn. Did he eat too many
he had
peach pits or whatever?
He had another stroke while doing a live show. So
oh darn. Okay. Anyways, moving on.
Going to be bad one day.
Anyway.
Continue?
Yes, yeah.
While I was working as a geophysicist, it was a conference about the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin and nature of human consciousness.
His bachelor's is in geology, but his PhD is in philosophy. Forgot to say that. Apricot seeds, whatever. Yeah. So his bachelor's is in geology. So he went to work in like the oil field or whatever for some time, and then he got his PhD in philosophy. Forgot to say that.
And it's this big.
What's it about apricot seeds?
Hovind pitches apricot seeds as like a miracle cure when they have like cyanide in them. So not great.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, it's a compound that breaks down into cyanide when you
that's what it is.
Metabolize it. Yeah.
And according, if you look at the screen, they're this big. The same.
On each panel between theists and philosophical materialists who were debating these big questions at the intersection of science and philosophy. And I was kind of stunned to learn, or to perceive at least, that the theists seemed to have the intellectual initiative in each of these big discussions, that materialism was a philosophy that was a spent force. It was not explaining where life first came from or the universe came from, let alone consciousness.
Your argument is literally just God of the gaps. It's literally just God of the gaps. That's all it is. Also, materialism says that some process we don't yet quite understand is responsible for life, but the theist said God done it, and that works for me.
Also, when he says these materialists, he's probably referring to the scientists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are scientists not interested in the origin of life or the universe? I think they pretty much are interested in those questions.
But also saying philosophical materialism is not atheism, or it's not naturalism. So a lot of times you'll see philosophers interchange naturalism and atheism, but materialism is a subset of naturalism or atheism. So you can't just refer to all atheists as philosophical materialists. That's not, it'd be like referring to all theists as creationists. Like, that's not fair. That's not the correct usage of that term. And
you can also be an atheist and believe in supernatural things too. Yeah, it's like it's
like ghosts and stuff. Yeah.
And the problem is that these people have like a black and white view of how things work. Like, oh, I am in this camp and everything else is in this camp, and everything else that I don't like is in this on this side. So you have all these terms that are almost treated as interchangeable, like evolution and naturalism and atheism. They're all synonyms almost to these guys. Which
for a philosopher, which Dr. Meyer it's ironic, because philosophers are some of the most pedantic people that I'm like aware of on the internet. They are so pedantic about every term, being like super precisely correct with every term. And then you go to the Discovery Institute and they're like, like you said, naturalism, atheism, evolution, Big Bang. They're like all mixed together. Materialism, all these things are just like interchangeable, and they're not. They're not interchangeable.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen this this propaganda picture? I think by the Answers in Genesis, where you see like a guy chopping down a tree, and you see in the tree of evolution all the bad things sprouting from it.
I haven't seen that one specifically, but I've seen the one with like the castle and the balloons.
Yeah,
it's like abortion and murder and all that jazz.
Yeah, the tree is also one of Ken Ham's ideas. It's an older one. I think it came before the castle thing. But yeah, keep in mind too, people like like this and creationists, if you believe in evolution, you're not a real Christian, so you might as well be an atheist.
Yep.
And by constantly saying stuff like that, constantly making those interchangements between not accepting evolution and being an atheist and being a materialist, that is just to get to the common goal, to have people buy into their pseudo nonsense.
If you can present the other side as just like a giant boogeyman, it makes it really easy to hit.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Which all right, we can keep going.
I began, in a sense, on a kind of intellectual journey to see where these new evidences, the evidence for the beginning of the universe,
no, you did not. You did the exact opposite. I mean, I'm not a smart person, but damn.
Oh, I disagree, Peter.
Well,
I think you're pretty smart.
I mean, when I'm in this panel, I'm the dumbest person on the panel. I'm proud to say that because I can't. Most of what you guys talk about goes straight over my head, but I'm smarter than this guy, who might be street smart.
Someone should edit a blunt into Meyer's hand.
Okay, we shall make that a thumbnail for next week.
No, okay. So Vosh has this thing where he like pulls out a crack pipe when the person that he's like responding to starts just like going completely off the rail. He pulls out like this little crack pipe and he puts that in front of him, and it's really funny. But that's what that makes me think of. All right, anyway, we can keep going.
Okay.
Universe, or the thing that really intrigued me was the discovery that at the foundation of life, and even the very simplest cells, we have this amazingly complex code. The DNA, we all learn about it in high school. We think that we all learn about the double helix structure of the DNA molecule, but that's not the most important thing about it. It's that within that double helix, there is literally a code, digital information.
It's not literally a code.
That is directing the construction of the important proteins and protein machines that every cell needs to stay alive.
It's not even digital. Like
Bill Gates said, it's like
moment.
a software.
Pause.
Like he says digital, but even if you treat the nucleotides as letters, it's not digit because it's not in a digital. It's not in a tube. It's not on the binary code, right?
Yeah.
What's digital mean? The definition of digit. I think it's just
digital. I'll look it up. Let's look at or the other thing he says is it's like software, which it isn't. It's a molecule. It is literally a molecule. It's not software.
That too.
It's not electricity.
Yeah. But my point is that it's a four letter.
You're right.
Code. Yeah.
Expressed as a series of digits 0 and 1.
Yeah. It's
typically represented by values of a physical quantity such as voltage or magnetic polarization. So it's not digital.
No, and it's also it's also not a code in the sense that he wants to make it look like, because and I get to use it this time. Citation needed, and I didn't misspeak. Citation needed. The Sinister Porpoise has made several videos about how DNA is not Turing complete and so cannot be considered an actual code, which not a lot of people know.
Immutable makes a point. It's sort of there. It's got some binary aspects to it, like whether it's purine or pyrimidine. But of course, it's not just putting any pyrimidine and purine together. Yeah. Obviously, it's specific ones. But no, you're right, and he's right. It's it's got binary aspects to it, but it is not in and of itself just a binary code. Is the point we're trying to make? Yeah.
And also it's unfortunate because when people talk about the genetic codes, they can either refer to the sequence of DNA or the correspondence between the codons and the amino acids. Yeah, those are very different things, and both are referred to as codes. So
Citation needed, as DM Seashells on top of Mount Everest wing says.
Yes. Yeah, because as I mentioned, the person who made a video about it is the Sinister Porpoise.
Mm-hmm.
Hence,
Exactly.
Hence,
we needed that cetacean.
Hence, cetacean needed. And I still think she should use that in her videos because she makes response videos to creationists. I think it's a brilliant title.
I see like in one source that I found that describes digital versus analog information. Like digital information is when information is expressed by discrete values, and analog is expressed in continuous values.
Well, I guess in that sense it would be, yeah.
Well, although if you refer to the codon assignments, then it's not discrete, because codons can it's a weird thing. For example, you can with the third codon position, you can have what's called a wobble base pair, where you don't have this discrete complements, basically. So you can have different codons matching up with the non-Watson-Crick base pairing, basically. So it's not a completely discrete thing, even in that case. Like for example, for example, you can have codon A, T, G, for example, but and the anti-codon will be let's see here, I think U, A, and C, right? Yes, that would be the anti-codon. But you can also have U, A, G too, because hold on, no, not UAG, UAA, yes, UAA, because the A can also, because the A is I confuse the two for often, a pyrimidine or a purine. I think an A is a pyrimidine, right? Yes, adenine is a pyrimidine.
Okay.
And it can also even though normally it pairs up with a U or with a T in DNA case, but it can also, like in RNA, during translation, it can have a wobble base pairing with a G, or even with with another codon. So it's more messier than you think. The translation, especially the translation.
What you're saying, Neslik, is you shouldn't make that claim in public. You should be discreet. Sorry, bad joke.
I said basically I remember a paper where it looks at the codon and anti-codon base pairing from an energetic perspective, and it shows that the base pairing that are more stronger are more reliable, because some codon anti-codon pairs have more hydrogen bridges, basically, and the ones that have more of these hydrogen bonds are more stronger and more reliable because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to mention this. James said, RJ said, if Meyer says anything apart from his routine pattern, I'll faint. Hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah.
We can't have RJ faint on the job.
Program, but much more complex than any we've ever created. And I was doing at the time, for the work as a geophysicist for an oil company, I was doing seismic digital signal processing, which was an early form of information technology. And I got fascinated with the idea that there was this, first of all, an impasse in evolutionary explanations of the origin of life. Nobody knew how we got from the chemistry in the prebiotic soup to the code.
Origins are bust. Here we go.
But it was fascinating that the impasse was created by the mystery surrounding the origin of information. Where did that come from? And so a year later, I was off to
old pattern.
Grad school in England. I ended up doing a PhD in origin of life biology within a history and philosophy of science department in Cambridge. And so that's kind of a sketch of my journey and how I got interested in this. I saw in one of your previous interviews, you said that you were very interested in origin stories. And me too. That was the...
Well, it's always interesting when you see someone who's kind of dedicated their life to a very specific thing. Like what's the root of this? Where did it come from? So for you, you went through this funk, and did you find comfort in religion? Is that what helped you? Did you find structure in it?
I found answers to basic worldview questions that I thought
God did it.
were, as a
God did it.
14-year-old, I
And
thought
God did it.
nobody, there must be something wrong with me. Nobody else is having these questions. I'm not talking to anyone at school who's worried about.
Nobody else would just say God did it.
I remember
except
one day,
me. I'm so brave.
Well, okay, for example, I was in this big leg cast, and I would crutch my way up to the up our driveway, get the newspaper, bring back the box scores to read, about the baseball games the night before, and every day it's a new date, and I do this and a new date and a new date, and I started thinking time is a really freaky thing. I can imagine an event.
Time is weird.
Lift this cup,
It do be
drop
weird.
it, put it over there. Now that event just took place, but it's already gone. We're not experiencing it anymore. We have a memory of it, but what does that actually mean? Where did there was this flow of sensory experience?
I'm not talking to anyone.
But
at
there
school.
didn't seem to be anything rooting it
Yeah.
that gave it an enduring reality. And I had this sense there must be something that doesn't change, or else everything else that does change is passing, ephemeral, and ultimately of no account. And so, you read. I ended
hold
up
on,
reading
pause.
the big.
So, wait a second. Did he just say that he's like, well, it nothing means anything unless there's like a prime mover. That's it. Like that's his amazing revelation. Is like the contingency argument. Really? That's so boring.
It's also
I mean,
stupid. Why
hold on. Let me
would
see where
nothing matter if there isn't primary mover? Why wouldn't anything matter?
Nepicros points out, he made an insightful comment. I like how Rogan is treating it more like a cope than an actual insightful concept. Yeah, you're kind of right. He was like, so did you feel like better after you became religious? That's basically what he said. Yeah, basically it's he's just saying, but something had to exist forever. Cool.
Why?
There's an uncontingent being. I mean, whatever. Like, okay. I mean, it really does just sound like a cope. Like that's really what it's coming off as. This is not coming off as deeply meaningful to the state of reality.
What to me is mind-boggling. Something has to exist forever, and then they pick something that we can't detect, we can't know for sure exists. They pretend that it is outside of space and time entirely. So wouldn't you pick something that you can actually detect, and if it's an intelligent something, interact with? Why come up with something that no one knows is real?
I'm sure he would say like, but we do know because intelligent design, and he would have his list of arguments for that. Which
because you don't know, because knowledge is demonstrable, and he would have to demonstrate his knowledge, and he can't.
Yeah, I'm sure in his mind he's like, it's rock solid, but then that's why he writes books. He doesn't publish papers. He does not go to peer review sources.
I work with Arn a lot. What comes to mind is I know that I know that I know that I know that I know. You don't know nothing.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
well.
And to me,
I mean, if that's what gets him through the, if it was one thing, if like the whole prime mover thing was like, this is what gets him through the day and makes him happy. Okay. That's one thing. Can't argue with that. That's fine. That's a purely emotional thing. But he's not just saying that. He's like, this answers fundamental questions about the state of reality. And it's like, no,
it doesn't.
It doesn't, actually.
It doesn't answer anything.
If that's what you need to get through the day, then fine. But if you want to use that to argue that, science can't explain things, but my prime mover can, well, sorry. Doesn't work that way.
No. So the first time I went to a church was a funeral service that was held for the wife of a friend of the family who was Catholic. So even though God was not mentioned during the entire service, I could get it that it is helping those who stay behind, especially the kids, who were pretty young back then. For them, it was comforting. But other than that, there is no real comfort because none of what they tell you, in this case, wasn't a lot about God, but he was in a better place. That's one thing that I remember. And well, okay, if so, she had cancer and it was really bad at the end. So any place would be a better place, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
other than that,
it is undeniably true that religion brings like comfort to people.
Yes,
it's undeniably true that is the case.
The service, it was a beautiful service where they went over her entire life, over the things that she loved to do, over the things that people loved to do with her. So yeah, that was a great comfort. But you don't need a God for that. Although the setting was also nice. I mean, it's a beautiful church. It's Catholic, so it has a lot of statues, ornaments, everything. There's they have the special clothing and an entire show if you want to look at it like that. So yeah, I can get that, but I still think that you could do the same thing if you really want to do it. You could do the same thing without even invoking a God. You can have a great funeral service. You can make that whatever you want it to be. One of my favorites is the guy, I think it was in Scotland, who had recorded a message that started playing when they lowered the casket. That to me was brilliant. The guy started shouting from his own casket. He had pre-recorded that because So that to me that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Continue.
Fat
yes
family Bible that I'd never cracked, and found that when God revealed his name to Moses, it was the I am that I am, this timeless, eternal person. And you found the same thing in the New Testament, the way Jesus Christ was referred to. So I thought, I wonder if there is something that doesn't change. And so the kind of philosophical questions that I was having made me want to explore whether or not
he said he was already a convinced theist, and now he's like, maybe there is some. Well, what were you convinced of before? You were like, I'm a theist, but I don't know what God I believe in. Like, what?
I became convinced. I was convinced.
In all fairness, Jackson, in the time that I've been on social media, I have had 2 former friends convert to Islam without reading the Quran. They accepted Islam without knowing what the hell the Quran says. So I can get it that someone like Stephen Meyer would do the same thing with Christianity. I haven't seen people at least in my circles, fall for it. And I still don't know why would you become a theist if you have no clue what your religion is about?
It's like I'm not super surprised that he hadn't opened the Bible, but the idea that like he had never thought about like the nature of God as a theist before he opened the Bible, like that's bonkers to me. That's like, I accept evolution. Do you know what evolution is? Nope, but I accept it. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why would you accept something which you don't like comprehend in any way?
You have to have a rudimentary idea of what it is before you can accept something, because you need to be convinced And in order to be convinced, you have to have an argument that convinces you. Which
that I don't know. That kind of sounds like it kind of sounds like an admission that he was like already sort of he kind of predisposed towards accepting the theistic conclusion, without I don't know. Anyway, we can keep going.
Religion might in fact be true.
Can I ask you to expand on that? What do you mean by something that does not change?
Some eternal self-existent reality, I guess. It was not something as a 14-year-old I had worked out. It was a kind of an intuition that there.
Have you worked it out now, Stephen?
It was the experience of having the constant flux of changing sense perceptions left me with a sense that there was nothing solid to hold on to in reality. And
so is it really just like he's afraid of death?
This is not
that really it? Is his thing he's just afraid of death? Like of not existing? Somebody said that earlier. Yeah, Smitty said it. Yeah, fear of death. Like really? That's his big backstory is like, wow, man, life kind of sucks. I wish that there were something like afterlife that was nice. Like, okay. All right.
My thing is, kind of sucks, but it can be improved. That's how I approach the situation.
And I mean, some people have really hard situations, and that's fine. That's life, and maybe believing in God helps you get through that. But like, Meyer here is trying to present himself as like, I've rationally, objectively considered all the possibilities, and this is the one that I've come to, and that's the way he presents himself everywhere else. But now he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm like afraid of ego death, as Neppy Crow says. I just don't really want to die. And it's that's
what he hasn't considered.
Reveal.
What he hasn't considered is the afterlife. I usually ask people, what's your favorite food? And they will tell me what their favorite food is. And then I tell them, now imagine that that's the only food you're going to have forever. How long do you think it's going to still be your favorite food? If you're going to have an afterlife that is forever, eternal, how long will it take for it to become so boring that you want out desperately?
Yeah. That is an interesting question. Yeah. I've thought about that before, and it's like, yeah, you would like run out of things to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a philosopher, but whatever. I'm sure someone's going to clip that. Anyway, all right, we can keep going.
This is not the argument for the existence of God that I would repose, in which I would repose great trust. I'm not trying to persuade anyone by this. I'm just telling what my experience was at this point. I later found what I think are very, very persuasive arguments, both philosophically and scientifically.
At least he's honest here.
The thing that really convinced.
Yeah, I was about to say he's very upfront about this. Like I in his position, he like you would think he shouldn't begin with this line of reasoning, right? Because they want to appear objective and not religiously based. That's the whole idea. It's the whole ID stick. Like, oh, we are not religious. We're just honest scientists.
We're just asking questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here he is, just kind of out of the gate. Maybe they they smoke some weed beforehand, and he's all chill now, and or something.
No, it's the residual fumes in the room there.
He's got a contact high. Yeah. But yeah, he's literally just like, yeah, man, I'm kind of afraid of death, so that's why I believe in God. But nowadays, I have like good arguments. It's like, okay, whack. That's super whack. But all right, we can keep going.
It's also fun to know that if you come up with additional arguments, the first ones weren't so good after all. Because why would you go searching for better arguments?
Aren't you afraid of death? I know I am. That's why you should be a Christian.
I'm not afraid of death. I'm the only thing that I might be afraid of is getting dead. That's the troubling part. But that's also the shortest part. Never mind.
Yeah.
Me as a university student studying philosophy was an argument known as the argument from epistemological necessity. The fundamental question in modern philosophy that has really just been a stumper and has led to this whole postmodern turn where people don't think there's no objective basis for any reality is the question of the reliability of the human mind. On what basis can we trust? I don't think that's what that means at all, actually. The way our
if you say if you are asking the question like how can I know that like my senses are reliable, typically the best way we do that is by interacting with the world, and like we make predictions. We don't think about it that way, but we make predictions, right, about if I touch this wall it's going to be solid, right, or if I eat this food I'm going to get a certain bodily reaction from it, etc.
Yeah.
Right, like we know that our senses are not completely reliable. We know this. It is a fact our senses are not completely reliable. And if you just say, well, what about God? Okay. I don't know how that solves anything, because our senses are still not totally reliable, even if God exists.
It's the old, cliche question of, how do you know you're not in the Matrix? Like you cannot tell either way. So my position is like I take a pragmatic stance on these types of questions. Like even if I'm in the Matrix,
it doesn't matter.
What can I do? What can I do?
Right. Yeah.
What can I do differently? Yeah.
If you're a brain in a vat, it really doesn't matter because all of our sensations are real, and until such time as it's been proved to me that I am a brain in a vat, I'm just going to keep doing normal stuff.
Yeah, I still have to go to the toilet and wipe my ass.
Correct. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so basically, I don't know what he's doing is like that's basically the route that was it oh gosh, who did the I think therefore I am?
Descartes.
That wasn't Pascal. Descartes. There we go. Descartes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Descartes was like,
Descartes. Yeah.
God undergirds like the universe and our senses, and since we know God would not trick us, that's our route for reality, basically. But that doesn't. Even if that's the case, like it doesn't really help us in any way because our senses are still unreliable. So whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, if God didn't trick us, we still couldn't cross the street without being hit because our own senses would fail us and we would think it's safe to cross the street while there was a truck coming. God's not going to help you when that happens.
I think the pragmatic approach is the correct one because like if it doesn't matter, right? Like if it doesn't matter for all intents and purposes whether God exists because we can't physically like interact with him in any way, we can't know by any means that he exists. Well, that's indistinguishable from not existing, right?
Yeah.
It maybe God does exist, but if there's no way whatsoever to know he exists, then we don't know he exists. It could even be the case that he exists.
And then you still have to deal with the exact same thing of being a brain in a vat. You have to deal with the reality that you are presented with. And that's not going to make a difference whether or not you're a brain in a vat or not. You still have a reality that you need to deal with. It's the same reality.
Right.
So it's useless to even think about something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not making a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Mm-hmm.
Our minds process all that sensory information. This goes back to Hume and Kant and some of the philosophers in the Enlightenment period. And from that point forward, there was a great doubt. Maybe we can't trust our minds. Maybe we can't trust. We have all these things we assume about reality in order to make sense about reality. That every cause has an effect, for example. But we can't prove those things. We have to use those assumptions in order to know anything at all. And I encountered this argument that suggested, well, if we try to justify our ability to know the world around us by empirical data, by things we observe, this was Hume's argument. You can't do it. he was a radical empiricist and found that in order to make any sense of the sense impressions he had to presuppose the uniformity of nature. But to prove the uniformity of nature, he had to make reference to sensory observations, and so he was arguing in a circle. And so it came down,
you couldn't do anything else.
Justify
there's nowhere else to go.
You could get independent confirmation. You could get independent confirmation. Yeah. I mean, if other people sense the exact same things you do, you might be correct. And
I
mean, like, there's nowhere else to go with that.
It's not exactly circular, because you aren't using the same data points. You're using a different data point at a different time. You're not using the same data to affirm the same data. You're using this data at one point and data at another point to see if there is
that's like you're doing it again. Oh, it's fixed. Okay.
Well, and the uniformity of nature, at least up to a point, you can test. So that's another thing. It's not entirely circular. But invoking something that you can't see, hear, feel, smell, anything.
Yep, it's good.
Yeah. I don't know why it happens.
So how's that going to help? It's not.
You also can't know that the you can't know that the God that supposedly is like undergirding the universe or whatever is not like actually Satan, or like some kind of trickster God. You can't know that because, again, pragmatically speaking, if it seems like the God that undergirds the world is not a trickster God, when in fact they are, then you wouldn't know. You literally couldn't know that. So just appealing to a God outside of space and time, whatever, it doesn't help the situation at all. This helps in no way.
Dean Seashells on the Mount Everest wing says, I don't know, gonna go for it. That sounds kind of like science, and science is scary. Yeah, probably.
That's true. Okay, we can keep going.
Reliability of assumptions we make in our minds by observing the world. You had to use those assumptions to make sense of the observations. But if you presupposed that our minds were made by a benevolent creator who gave us those assumptions.
If you presuppose.
If you assume that someone gave us that's going to help.
Yeah, if you assume, if you remember earlier, he said, I have some really good philosophical arguments in favor of my position. If you assume that this is true, then it's true. Isn't it great how that works?
Yeah, that's so awesome. Okay.
They're knocking it out of the park today.
Yeah.
They're just knocking it out of the park.
In order to make sense of the world that he also made, then there was a principle of correspondence between the way the mind worked.
That you assume he made. Another assumption. Just pointing it out, the obvious.
And the way the world worked, in which case we could trust the basic reliability of the mind. And this turns out to be one of the key foundational assumptions that gave rise to modern science. It was called the idea of intelligibility. Newton, Boyle, Kepler, the great founders of modern science, thought that nature had secrets to reveal. There were patterns there to be revealed that we could understand because our minds had been made in the image of the same rational creator who had built rationality and desigin and pattern and lawful order into the world.
Do you believe in evolution?
I believe in, I believe in microevolution. I believe that there are real evolutionary processes. I'm skeptical about what's called universal common descent, the idea that all living forms have evolved from one single common ancestor. I'm profoundly skeptical about chemical evolution, the idea that the non-living chemicals in a prebiotic ocean or prebiotic soup arrange themselves to form the first living cell. And I'm also skeptical about the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism, which, as it happens,
is microevolution.
So are many leading evolutionary biologists today. I attended a conference in 2016.
All right. So let's pause this for a moment. So
I was waiting for that.
So I was trying to see like how far he was going to go with this, and okay. So he is definitely avoiding the question. He's trying to like do a bunch of like twists and turns to avoid sounding stupid, because he is stupid. So when he said I accept microevolution, then he followed it up with, I am skeptical of the creative power of mutations. Now, microevolution is genetic change below the level of species.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that is mutations, recombination, which are generating variations, as well as other processes like epigenetics. And then these are being acted on by natural and sexual selection, genetic drift, gene flow, endosymbiosis can also happen. These are all microevolutionary things. That's all microevolution.
Is endosymbiosis maybe something different? Something? I don't know how you would categorize that. Yeah,
I'd say it's a process, but it's not a. It's a process that leads to speciation, I would say, but it is not in and of itself like the speciation process. Is the way I would.
I think endosymbiosis is like a whole different category in of itself, because like you have multiple lineages becoming one. Basically, it's a very different process.
I would still say that falls.
It's my opinion.
I agree with that. I agree, but in both cases, the endosymbiotic event, I would still say falls below the level of species in terms of genetic processes. So you basically have like these two coming together, but they are not like at that moment becoming new species, right? So you have to have further genetic change occurring in them, which leads to speciation. Is the way I thought about it.
Well, if I can give my opinion, is that like if you sorry about that. If you I think the question about like the question whether endosymbiosis is below or above the species level, I think it's a category error, because endosymbiosis doesn't really involve species. It's a different thing in itself. That's my opinion.
The way that I think about it is like it is part of a process that is probably going to lead to like speciation. Like when you get those sorts of associations, you're dealing with like a new sort of like metabolic processes that are occurring in one member of a population relative to the others, which can lead to speciation, but doesn't necessarily. Although, I don't know, I'm wiggly on it. The point was simply that these are all processes that intelligent design could theoretically accept. Now, speciation is something, well, speciation falls under macroevolution. So macroevolution is genetic change at or above the level of species, which includes speciation. And so in theory, they could accept it, and they say they do, but they won't give you explicit examples. When you say, hey, do you accept like this species becoming this species? They won't talk about that. They don't like to talk about it. Jonathan Wells, for instance, explicitly argued against observable examples of speciation. He hates it. So he's like a species, what's the term for it? What they call it?
Essentialist?
Yeah, he's like a species essentialist, basically. Yeah, that was a term for it they used back in Darwin's day. Anyway, but yeah, he's like a Linnaean sort of creationist. Like every single species is a created kind. So Meyer, if you read his books, which apparently he doesn't, he accepts macroevolution because he allows for speciation and common ancestry all the way up to the taxonomic level of the phylum. So if you read Darwin's Doubt, his second book, he lumps like arthropods together. He lumps chordates together. He lumps, velvet worms and tardigrades and whatever else. They're in their respective phyla, and he claims like that's the kind. Well,
yeah, it's weird that like when at the moment they talk about the Cambrian, then suddenly phylum, and then everything after the Cambrian and within phyla, it's all just no significant changes.
Yeah, so they're like it's so if you guys have watched like Answers in Genesis, they talk about the creation orchard rather than like the tree of life. And so the creation orchard for the creationists, the young earth creationists, is the family level. The Intelligent Design Discovery Institute says, well, yeah, we agree with that, but we just push it back to the phylum level. So they're doing the same thing. They're just pushing it back a little bit, or a ways, really. But it's the same argument at its core. That's all it is.
Mhm.
It's separate ancestry because of reasons, really bad reasons.
I think it's also to be pointed out that like some of the statements he says, like he chose very particular statements that on its face it doesn't sound unreasonable. Like for example, he says like, "Oh, I'm skeptical of origin of life occurring in the ocean." Well, of course, like I pretty much nobody is proposing that life originated in the open ocean, at least. Like
also not part of evolution.
He's skeptical about the mutation and selection. Of course, there are more things about evolution besides mutations and selection. Like there is also drift and many other mechanisms.
Recombination and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
But am I the only one who
like
thinks...
I said, he very deftly answered that question.
Am I the only one who thinks that he might be a second Todd Wood, but slightly less honest? Because why didn't he answer...
all the creationists are slightly less honest, Todd Wood.
If he gets the question, do you accept evolution? Why didn't he say no? But chose a lot of different answers.
He knows that Joe's audience is receptive to evolution because Joe has openly stated that in other interviews. And so Joe is down with evolution. And so if Meyer just comes out and says no, then Joe's just going to be like, well, okay, you're just anti-science. That's all you are. Right. And so he has to...
It's his job. It's his job.
It's like the ninja throwing stars and like Meyer's like doing the Matrix to try to avoid them. Like answer while avoiding them, that sort of stuff. So yeah.
I still don't get it.
I won't accept universal.
I still don't get it. He writes books that he questions evolution. He is part of ID, which is basically questioning evolution. Yeah. The honest answer would have been no. I believe in this, and I don't get it. If you're on a podcast with someone who accepts evolution and their entire audience accepts evolution, and you are part of the Discovery Institute, wouldn't this be a great way to get people to come look at your stuff and promote that instead of trying to weasel out of the question with lots of vague arguments? The most infuriating is that the first one he mentions is abiogenesis, which isn't part of evolution, and he knows isn't part of evolution.
But it has to be for his purposes.
Yes. So this is what I don't get. Be honest. At least be honest, even when it's difficult. If you know, this to me only says, I know that I'm lying to people, so I have to be really careful with what I say right now. And that's the part that I don't get. Just be honest. But then we wouldn't have a Discovery Institute. People were honest.
Very true. All right, we can keep going.
convened by the Royal Society in London. Royal Society being the oldest and most august scientific body in the world. And it was convened by a group of evolutionary biologists who were essentially dissatisfied with neo-Darwinism, the standard textbook theory that we learn
from the 1930s,
high school and college textbooks, and many of them were saying we need a new theory of evolution. The first talk at that conference was given by Gerd Müller, a prominent Austrian evolutionary biologist, and he simply enumerated the 5 major what he called explanatory deficits of neo-Darwinism. And his basic perspective was the mutation selection mechanism does a good job of optimizing or modifying pre-existing forms.
Almost like that's what evolution is.
Small-scale variation, but it does a very poor job of explaining the origin of those forms. Think about, for example, the Darwin's finch beaks. Great job of explaining how variations in weather patterns result in changes in the shape and structure of the finch beaks. But that mechanism turns out not to do a good job of explaining the origin of birds or other major animal groups in the first place.
Okay, pause. Pause. Okay, so actually birds as a whole are exquisitely explained by mutation and selection. So if you look, birds are a subset of theropod dinosaurs. How do we know this? They have all the same bones that theropod dinosaurs have. And many of the same proportions that theropod dinosaurs have. They have feathers like theropod dinosaurs had. They have all these different characters. We did a whole video where we talked about the different characteristics that theropods and birds share. So we know for a fact now that birds are dinosaurs. And if you look at the earliest birds like Archaeopteryx and Schautingia and Aurornis, they look so much like dinosaurs that there's debate as to whether or not they fall outside of like the clade Avialae, which is birds in their like the stem group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's debate over a lot of these guys. Some Scansoriopterigids have like flipped back and forth. Some Dromaeosaurs have flipped back and forth.
These are fuzzy dinosaurs, and whether they are birds is kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, and in part it's like one of the characteristics is just like, do they flap their wings for powered flight? Like you get so far down that the difference is whether or not they can get powered flight by flapping their wings. Like that's it. that's the defining characteristic.
I have a question, Jackson.
It's not any bones.
Did they get the worm though?
What? Yes, everybody gets the worm.
The earliest birds.
Correct. Archaeopteryx got the worm.
Sorry. Another dad joke.
And so the evolution of like powered flight in early avialans, because powered flight actually evolved within the Avialae. So Archaeopteryx could fly, not super well, but it could fly. But as avialans downsized, they got progressively better at flying because they already had like a surface that was that would like could slow their fall, and so by making larger and larger wings, by building up this breastbone and the muscles attached to it, you get this stronger like this power stroke, and so by putting those characteristics together, you generate you're able to generate the lift. You have to have a smaller body, so natural selection selected for smaller size avialans, and then once they crossed that threshold, then powered flight was achieved, and then they could get larger sizes again. But to say natural selection and mutations don't explain, maybe they don't explain like alone. Sexual selection probably plays a role too, and so does genetic drift. I mean, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I would say that genetic drift actually plays a bigger role than selection, especially on long time scales, because it's the old debate about like, if you replay the tape of life, would you expect the same thing? Probably not. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So no, this argument is absolutely bogus. I wonder if Joe's going to push back at all, or if he's just going to go, okay. All right, we can keep going.
Modification, yes. Innovation, no.
So modification over massive amounts of time don't you think that would eventually lead to new groups? Because a lot of new groups have similar origins, or at least origins from one ancestor.
Okay.
Well, time.
primates.
Time was always the hero of the plot. But let me just run a couple of arguments by you, and let's see what you think. Okay. And I developed these in a lot of detail in my book, Darwin's Doubt.
Finally.
If we now know, thanks to the genetic revolution, the molecular biological revolution, that if you want to build a new form of life, you have you have to have new code, because all new forms of life depend upon new anatomical, fundamentally
What
new
do you mean by new?
type of animal, for example. So
Pause
you
for a
need
second,
new
please.
anatomical.
What do you mean by new? When he says new code, he means new DNA. But what does that mean?
New genes. I know.
Do you just need new genes? Because gene duplication gives you new genes that then you can be neo-functionalized and go down different evolutionary routes. And is that what you mean? You mean new?
Also, the deep homology tends to refute that idea that, like, you have a different quote-unquote body plan, like an arthropod body plan is a different genetic information system than the vertebrate body plan. But as it turns out, we have a lot of commonality when it comes to the Hox gene system that lays out our bilaterian body plan.
Yeah, so PAX6 is one of the most famous bilaterian genes. It is, it is one of the master genes in control of eye development. That's true for us. It's true for lancelets. It's true for fruit flies, velvet worms, nematodes. That one gene, it is involved in our eye developmental process across all bilaterians. And so to say, well, you have to have new code. Well, what do you mean by that? When you say it, what do you mean? Because a lot of a lot of structures are the result of what are called gene families. So you duplicate these genes and then neo-functionalize them, right? They take on new functions. So I'll give you, for instance, our photoreceptors have retinal. Retinal is in the G protein coupled receptor gene family, which is an absolutely enormous gene family. It's huge, but at its core,
I think you meant rhodopsin.
Rhodopsin. I'm sorry.
Retinal is the cofactor. It's basically the derivative of vitamin A, I think. But
it's involved in the
protein is
process,
rhodopsin.
Rhodopsin. Rhodopsin.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up later, but yes, rhodopsin is part of the G protein coupled receptor gene family, and so in bacteria and archaeans use G protein coupled receptors also, not for the same thing, obviously, but they're using it they're getting sunlight and they're using it to power metabolic processes, right? So it's doing stuff in them with you. They're using these proteins, but we are also using these proteins. We're using a protein within the same family, but for a different function, right? So this is a very, very, very old group of enzymes. So again, what do you mean by new? What does new mean? And
I also quickly looked up, and I see some papers saying that PAX6 or maybe PAX6-like genes are also involved in jellyfish eyes or eye-like structures too. The jellyfish also have these pigment structures too that function as eyes.
Yes. Okay. So rhodopsin. Rhodopsin is the enzyme. It's got retinal. Then retinal is kinked, right, and then it straightens out when light hits it. Okay.
And it's the reason why you need vitamin A, because vitamin A is the precursor to the retinal in that compound.
Yeah, exactly. So and then we duplicated rhodopsin. We duplicated rhodopsin gene, which is why we have trichromatic vision, whereas most other primates don't. With one interesting exception, the howler monkey. Watch our howler monkey's tale for more information. But yeah, so needless to say, when he says new information, he's not going to give a definition. They never do, because they don't want pesky definitions getting in the way of a good narrative, right? Box jellyfish do have actual eyes. Yeah, it's
yeah.
They have oh gosh, what are they? They're like statistists or something like that. Basically, it's like they have a lot of similarities with camera eyes, oddly enough, but they're jellyfish. It's very strange. Yeah. Anyway, all right, ready to keep going?
Structures but the new anatomical structures require new cell types. New types. So if you got animals that first come on the line and they have a digestive system, they have a gut. Well, you got to have enzymes that can service a gut, that can process food. So enzymes are types of proteins. Proteins are built from the informational code in DNA.
Okay, pause for a second.
You want to get a new.
Sorry, I'm cutting off early. Crazy idea. I just had it. What if you had digestive enzymes before you had a gut? Whoa, crazy. I know, super crazy stuff. What if you could like delegate jobs between different cells? Whoa, crazy. So now you have a place where you can specifically express those digestive enzymes. So now you don't have to do it in every cell. You can only do it in some cells. So you're not generating new information per se. You are changing the spatiotemporal expression of existing genes. And that's what a lot of evolution is. It's not like, oh, well, suddenly they had to eat food, so they had to make a gut, and then, oh, well, they realized they had to make digestive enzymes too, so then they had to do that. You know what this reminds me of honestly, the Kent Hovind, like, the bacteria had to find someone to marry. That's what this sort of argument reminds me of. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Was it Ray Comfort? That's asking those types of questions. Like,
maybe it was
a male.
No.
A male dog. You need to find a female dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was
he got it.
Yeah,
he got it from Hovind. Hovind, I think, was the first one to use it. At least use it a lot in his videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I was pretty sure I remembered. I did forget about Ray Comfort, but yes, I was pretty sure Hovind does that. He's like, well, the first bacterium came into existence, then you had to wait for another one to come into existence so they could get married and have kids. And what did they eat the whole time? And it's like, what? What? But that's the same. This is the same line of argument, you know, as what it sounds like, anyways. So, all right, we can keep going.
It's just like in the computer world. If you want to give a computer a new function, you've got to provide new code.
I hate this analogy.
We have these long digital bit strings of ACs, Gs, and Ts, not zeros and ones, but ACs, Gs, and Ts in a digital string, and we call that a gene. And if you have a section of DNA for building a protein, that's great, all works. But if you want to build a fundamentally new form of life, you got to have new proteins to service the new cell types to build the new anatomical structures. In our computer world, we know that if you start randomly changing the zeros and ones in a section of digital code,
again,
you're going to degrade the function of that code long before you come up with a new string for making a new program. Or
thank you. Again, he's saying that in order for new cell types or new body plans, you need new proteins and also new genes. But it's often very not the case. For example, like one of my favorite things about developmental biology is how little tweaks in the development, like accelerating development or stopping development at a certain point, can lead to very drastic differences. And one of my favorite examples is the axolotl. And you have also an axolotl in your home, I think, right?
Yep, he's right over there.
Little Darwin over there, yeah. Little old Darwin. And do you know what is the main difference, or what causes the main difference between an axolotl and a typical salamander?
They don't produce thyroxine and triiodothyronine.
Yes, exactly. It's just a hormone. Maybe one or at least one or maybe a few hormones, but
they don't make the iodine-containing hormones that you need to do metamorphosis, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, that one difference. One animal goes or becomes a terrestrial salamander, or it remains an aquatic water breathing, or it retains gills. Very different lifestyles, very different results, and just for one hormone. Yeah, you don't need, like, of course, I don't dispute that there were new genes along the way, but yeah. But the idea that, like, for like an anatomical difference has to correspond to a genetic difference of equal magnitude is not that simple.
No, it's
ironically
insane.
enough.
No. His arguments, the arguments he makes are, like, at its core, he's really not that different from Kent Hovind.
Mm-hmm.
I know he presents himself as very well-read, and is very objective and everything, but at its core, they're not that different. They really aren't. They're both pseudoscience proponents, and they rely on a lot of the same or very similar arguments. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Nestling. Yeah, this is nuts. I was just reading a paper, and also a throwback to we had a guest on not too long ago, or maybe it was a long time ago. Like I said, time isn't real. He's a biologist from Spain named Iñaki Ruiz Trillo. And so what Dr. Ruiz Trillo has shown is that, along with others like Nicole King, is that a lot of the genes that like choanoflagellates and ichthyosporians use, so these unicellular relatives of animals, they use a lot of the same genes that animals have for cell-to-cell communication, right? So they just took those genes, or the ancestors of animals took those genes that already existed in unicellular animals and adapted them for new purposes, right? We still have them. We still have receptor tyrosine kinases and like the Wnt pathway and all these other things, which are in protists. They're in unicellular protists. It's not that different.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not using these for exactly the same thing, obviously, because they're unicellular.
Yeah.
But we still have them. Go ahead.
No. Just you finish first. It reminds me of something else. But if you want to finish first, go ahead.
Oh, that was it. I was done. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Like it reminded me too of something else. Like I am, like, my professional study is into plant biology, and in plants they don't use Hox genes or for their main development. The main developmental gene family is MADS box genes, MADS, MADS box genes, and it's very peculiar because plants do have Hox genes, but not many, and they aren't used in very significant ways. But they do have MADS box genes, and it's the same way for animals. They have a few MADS box genes, but not many. So it turns out that in the common ancestor, you have both of these genes, but one of them was used in animals for developmental biology, and in the plants, a different group of genes were used for developmental biology.
So it's like they were part of, like, the core eukaryotic, like, regulatory set, basically.
Yeah, probably they were transcription factors, some type of regulatory genes, and they were used for the main development in different lineages. Yes, it's very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. That's really super cool.
I have to ask you, Jackson, because you said he's a lot like Kent Hovind. I'm pretty sure you haven't heard the latest absolute nonsense claim that Hovind has made. Did you know that Jesus was multi-ethnic?
Yes. Next question.
You heard that claim?
He's the Son of God. He is all ethnicities.
No.
Obviously.
So
he is the one human.
When Hovind sees Jesus, he looks like a Nordic type. Blonde hair, blue eyes. When an Asian person sees Jesus, Jesus looks Asian. When a Hispanic person sees Jesus, he looks Hispanic. Apparently,
that sounds like it's a figment of all their imaginations.
Yeah, apparently there's not a black version. Weird.
Oh no.
Yes.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Sad. Anyway, all right, we can keep going.
And he gets mad if people said that he can be. Rogan gets mad.
Operating system. The functional sequences are they're highly isolated in what's called sequence space. You can change a few things and still retain function, but after a very few number of changes, you're going to degrade the function, and long before you come up with a new function. Now, the Darwinian mechanism.
Okay, so let's pause for a moment because I want to explain what he's referencing. So what that is a reference to is a 2004 paper by Douglas Axe. So Axe calculated using a method which is not wrong in and of itself, but he extrapolated that method for one version of an enzyme to all enzymes. So basically, he took, and what's really funny, actually I was just reading a paper about it yesterday. He took an enzyme, a version of an enzyme that is actually highly susceptible to like temperature changes, which again, already curious. And the mutations that like push it in like either direction, like it's very susceptible to being degraded by mutations, is what Axe was working with. So taking this highly mutation like intolerant enzyme, and then saying, like, you can say for that one, okay, the odds of getting a mutation that works for this one are fairly low. Okay, maybe that's the case. But he took that and he said, okay, this is true for all enzymes everywhere. And that's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. When we did the Professor Dave video for Stephen Meyer, sorry, we talked about DNA polymerase. So DNA polymerase is a very ancient enzyme, very, very ancient. And the sequences that make up polymerase are not the same from bacteria up, to mammals. And so when you say like, oh, we can tolerate a little change, but not a lot. Like, again, what do you mean? How do you quantify a little change versus a lot of change? There's somewhere he said it was in an interview, I think, where he was like, an enzyme can only tolerate like 15 codon changes. He said that somewhere. I watched him say it. He was like on stage with William Lane Craig, and Craig was like, "That's nonsense," or something like. It was really funny because Craig called him out, which it is nonsense. That's just silly. There's this thing called like alanine scanning, where you can change lots of the codon, or in some enzymes you can change lots of the codons with alanine, and it doesn't affect the function of the enzyme at all. Now, if you affect like one of the primary residues that are responsible for the enzymatic activity, then you're gonna affect the enzyme.
It's I think it's called the catalytic triad. Like often there are like three amino acids that have their side chains oriented in such a way that forms the catalytic center. And those are often not. They are very sensitive to mutations. Yes, those.
Yeah. So you can't like screw with those per se, but you can mess with a lot of the other ones, and really nothing at all happens. And even if something does happen, like maybe it only very slightly affects the enzyme or something like that, it's nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. But that's kind of what Meyer's been playing on for, like 2 decades now. So, all right, we can keep going.
With the idea that there are random changes in those digital bit strings, those sequences of A's, C's, G's, and T's. And based on our experience in the computer world, we would expect that random changes are going to, again, degrade those strings long before they're capable of building a new
enzymes
protein.
Aren't computer code or something.
There's now very
based on what we learned in the computer world, has nothing to do with.
Based on what I learned about outer space, I don't think this is how geology works. No, wrong. Sorry.
Compelling experimental evidence that that's true. There's an Israeli.
I can ride a bicycle, so I can drive a
biologist
car. It works, guys. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And you don't fall over if you drive a car.
Tofik.
Exactly. You don't
died
even fall over.
fairly recently in a tragic accident. But he was doing mutagenesis experiments on sequences.
Wait, who did he say died?
On sequences of code for building specific.
I miss who he said died. Oh well. It's okay.
Israeli molecular biologist Dan Tofik. Unfortunately, he died fairly recently in a tragic accident. But he was doing mutagenesis experiments on sequences of
I've heard about it too.
on sequences of code for building specific proteins that fold it into stable structures. They're actually called protein folds. And he found that between 3 and 15 mutations was enough to degrade the thermodynamic stability of the protein structure that the gene was making.
Pause. That's to the catalytic core that Nestle was talking about. That is not to the whole thing. So that is nonsense. He is lying. He is lying. Bald-faced lie. He's referring to what Nestle was talking about with the catalytic core, where if you mutate the catalytic core, the thing that's doing the catalysis for the enzyme, if you screw with that, you could ruin the enzyme. But if you mutate a bunch of other things in it, which are not like the core amino acids with their side chains, then you are not going to destroy the enzyme. That is just nonsense. God. This is so frustrating.
There's a whole bunch of research on what's called ancestral protein reconstruction, and then they look at the whole evolution of these proteins and genes. And one of my favorite researchers is Thorpe, I think Thorpae.
Okay.
And I think he has a good papers on some I forgot the name of the receptors. I think the glucocorticoid receptors, if I pronounce it correctly. But there are these receptors that bind to hormones. And what's basically happening in the early vertebrates, you have one receptor and one hormone. And in later or in more derived vertebrates or in tetrapods, this receptor and hormone duplicated. Now you have 2 receptors and 2 different hormones.
Yeah.
And he's reconstructing that exact history, amino acid by amino acid change, basically from the whole evolution of these receptor genes. It's very interesting. Of course, he doesn't account for all of that. Of course, he just disregards that.
Yeah. So frustrating. Goodness gracious. Okay, tragically misinformed. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. He just made an oopsie. He just made a little oopsie. It was just an accident. All right. A little bit more, then we'll call it for today.
Well,
go a little bit longer.
I was just about to ask you, because do you want to make a full 2-hour show, or do you want to cut off at the usual time? Because we started 12 minutes late, so we can do a little bit longer. I mean,
I see what you're saying. Okay. You're right. So we should end at, so my time 9:12. Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. Gotcha.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. Yeah.
And once you lose that thermodynamic stability, you have no functional possibilities.
Is there possibly an undiscovered mechanism for protecting against that we're not aware of yet?
Possibly, but there's numerous lines of evidence suggesting that that mutations are within limits. You can modify again. You can optimize an existing protein structure called a fold. But if you allow too many of those mutations, you're going to degrade. And long before you would get a fundamentally new protein structure, another protein.
What does that even mean?
So that's
what I was about to ask. Degrading. So it degrades from one form by getting something that is beneficial and slowly moving into a different form.
Because he said it can optimize. He said it can be optimized. That's not degrading.
Yes. And if it's beneficial, it's not degrading at all. It is optimizing.
Yeah.
One of many. I want to run one other argument by you that I think is very intuitive.
Yeah, this one doesn't work. Let me do something else.
If you want to build, it turns out that there are structures or systems for building that are very important for building new animal body plans, and they're called developmental gene regulatory networks. They were discovered at Caltech by Eric Davidson and colleagues. Eric Davidson has also unfortunately recently passed away.
It's not
in the last few years.
True, but whatever.
But what they discovered is that you not only have genes for building proteins, you have genes that are building that for constructing molecules that send signals that tell the genome when to express other parts of itself. So you've got there's signaling molecules that.
So pause for a moment. So actually, technically. Well, they didn't know how this happened, but actually, Thomas Hunt Morgan back in the 19-teens and 20s, his teams had actually sort of predicted the existence of Hox genes because so a homeotic mutation, as it originally was defined, was we have Paleologos in the side chat. A homeotic mutation, as it was originally defined, was a change in the the sequence identity, a change in the identity of a segment. So like Antennapedia is one of the most famous ones, obviously, goes way back to like the 19-teens. So that's when the antenna of flies were their segmental identity was changed to being legs, which actually originally insect antenna were legs, but they were changed to a different type of leg. So
like every body part was legs almost. Like
basically,
the mouth parts were legs.
Antenna were legs. The wings are like part legs. Yeah, exactly. It's all legs.
Yeah, I know the wings are a very weird outlier. Yeah, the wings.
Yeah, they're like it's like cells from the legs and the back, like merged.
Yeah. Like that's a recent paper that I've also seen. Yeah, that it proposed like a from two different tissues that fused together. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's super weird. Very strange. But anyway, again, that's another example of like, wings didn't come out of nowhere. They were taken from existing tissues and merged together. Right? They didn't just come from nowhere. They were like extensions of like the chitinous exoskeleton of arthropods. But anyway, I've lost my train of thought. I don't even remember what we were talking about. Arthropods, wings, Hox genes. There we go. Hox genes. So the idea of Hox genes actually, or of like promoters and regulators and all these sorts of things, enhancers. So they were actually kind of hinted at, but yeah, they weren't like really worked out until like the 80s and 90s when we started being able to do genetic sequencing. And now, of course, we know that they're all over the place. They do all sorts of jobs. They're like promoters, promoter regions, enhancers. There are regions that just fully stop, gene transcription, all this sort of stuff. But I wonder where he's going with this. I wonder where he's going to go with this point.
They're telling the genome when to turn this part or that part on in order to build the right proteins at the right time as new cells are going through cell division in the process of animal development. So if you go from 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, etc.
Oh, that also reminds me. Pause for a second. I'm sorry, I keep cutting short. Again, the thing about the thing about cell development, when you go from like a totipotent to a pluripotent to a multipotent cell, the difference is not the genes, it's epigenetic regulations, right? It's things that are happening to the DNA that allow it to only express certain genes. That's the difference. It's not like they're not like becoming new gene or new. They're not becoming like new cell types, right? It's changing the regulation of the existing genes. And in fact, even our closest unicellular relatives like choanoflagellates, ichthyosporians, filasterians, they all do. They basically have pluripotent cells. So they can switch between flagellated phases, so they can swim, and non-flagellated phases, right? So like choanoflagellates can make like these little stalks where they adhere themselves to the substrate, or they can be little flagellates who swim around, look like little sperm cells. Ichthyosporians, filasterians, they can do that too. The archaeocytes of sponges can also do that. They can differentiate from the archaeocyte, which can sort of amoeboid crawl around, into choanocytes, as well as oh crap, what's the other type of cell that sponges have? Pinacocytes. There we go. Pinacocytes.
Oh, yeah.
But the cool thing about when they turn into choanocytes is the choanocyte can then de-differentiate back into an archaeocyte. Fun fact. But then once it becomes a pinacocyte, it's basically done. Oh, Nestle, you're beeping again. Sorry.
So
He got attacked by robots. All right, we can keep going.
Is he licking a 9-volt battery? I'm curious. I want to know.
So you have a developing animal form. There are points in that trajectory where it's important to differentiate one type of cell from another, and for certain types of cells, muscle cells as opposed to nerve cells or bone cells, to be to start to be constructed. And all of this is closely choreographed by these signaling molecules. So you get DNA that builds regulatory RNA that turns on another part of the DNA that then turns on that builds a protein for servicing a particular type of cell at the right time and not at another time. And as Davidson and his colleagues mapped this out.
Can we pause? So he's not wrong what he said there. He's right about all that. The cool thing is that actually in development, so there's this idea in animal development. I don't know if it applies to plants too. Maybe it does, but it's called the hourglass model. And the reason it's called an hourglass model is when you have the very early embryos, they actually they're under the control of a few rather simple genetic programs. And when mutations happen in these, it can cause the embryos to diverge very widely in how the early embryos look. So whether they're doing like meroblastic cleavage or holoblastic cleavage or what have you, that can change, very widely. Nestle's AI voice just glitched out. Yep, exactly right.
Is it better now? Sorry about it. Like I don't know what this happens.
Yeah, you sound fine.
I think
there's no warning. Sorry.
I think Nestle that if you're going to put yourself on the charger, you need to use a grounded socket. I think that's the thing. While recharging.
And so, what was I saying?
Sorry, my nonsense
so
put
then
you off.
From the base, where the early embryos are very different, they pass through a phase where they actually look really similar. And then from there, they go through that phase where the embryos look very similar, and then they diverge again. And so the reason that they look very similar, it's thought, at that middle, the neck phase, is what's called the phylotypic stage. And the reason for that is you go from these few very simple genetic programs which specify the early embryo, then you deal with they become or generate more they generate more genetic programs which are then highly linked to each other, and then from there you deal with more genetic programs, but they're independent or they're clade specific, I guess I should say. And so that's why you get that really interesting pattern showing up in animal development. So anyway, we can keep going.
They discovered that the functional relationships that were involved looked like an integrated circuit. It was, and they call them developmental gene regulatory networks. And the point is, you can't build a completely developed animal form unless you have this choreography taking place that is expressed through these developmental gene regulatory networks. But they discovered something else about them, and that is that they cannot be altered significantly. If you alter
That's
any of
not
the
true
core
at all,
elements of these
actually.
developmental
It's
gene
not
regulatory
true,
networks,
That's
animal
not even
development shuts
slightly
down. And
true.
this makes
So he cites a paper. So he talks about developmental gene regulatory networks at the end of Darwin's Doubt, and he cites a paper that he
probably
claims,
the sea urchins, right? Yeah.
I think so. He cites a paper where he says, "Oh, they can't be changed at all." That's not what the paper says at all. The paper does not say they cannot be changed. He's just lying about it. Or sorry,
Yeah.
egregiously misinformed. My bad. Yeah, no, that's just nonsense. If you look at the genetic programming underlying, like, freaking like arthropods versus like, chordates versus nematodes, there are lots and lots of changes between these. I guess he would say probably, oh yeah, well they're different because they were separate creations. Well, even within the phyla, there are differences. It's not like it's 100% homologous among all of their like the gene regulatory networks that undergird like early development. That's not true. That's just not a thing. Like if it were a thing, then you would have to explain like why is it that some lineages within like chordates undergo meriblastic cleavage, but other ones undergo like holoblastic cleavage. Why does that happen if like it's 100% the same? You can't change anything. That's obviously not the case. It literally can't be the case. When you look at how much development or how many like morphological differences there are during development, there are quite a lot. Like I said, they start off very different, and then they also end up rather different from each other. They only pass through a phase where they're pretty similar, kind of in the middle, and that's what we call the phylotypic stage. Which also, ironically, Meyer argues against. He's argued that there is no phylotypic stage, which is really ironic. It's contradictory, I guess. It's contradictory to both say that like you can't change the gene networks, and then when you say, okay, well, here's the result of similar gene networks, he says, no, that's not real. It's like, pick a lane, my guy. You can't have it both ways. They can't be the same or produce the same outcomes, but like be totally different. I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't understand his position. It's very strange. So, Nestle, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I found the paper. I think that, like one of the researchers that is involved in these gene regulatory networks among the echinoderms, like the sea urchins and such. And it's one paper that is it's old, but still pretty good, I think, for those who are interested. Yeah, it compares these gene regulatory networks among the sea urchins, starfish, and also a network between Drosophila and vertebrates too, and see the commonalities and differences. And it shows that there are both commonalities and differences. So yeah, it's not. It goes more. I cannot. I haven't read this particular paper, but it goes into, as far as I can see, it goes into very great details of how this can evolve, at least.
Yeah, it can definitely change, even because he accepts phylum common ancestry. So within the phyla, it evolves. Interesting. Okay. All right, we can keep going.
Makes perfect sense to anyone with a background in, say, electrical engineering, because there's a principle of engineering that says the more tightly integrated a functional system,
don't ask a biologist, ask an engineer.
Any part of the system without defect to the whole. It's a constraints principle. And this turned out to be true in spades of these effectively integrated circuits. Now, they weren't controlling the flow of electricity, but more the flow of information in the developing organism. So here's the argument. You need a developmental gene regulatory network to make an animal body plan. But if you want to turn one animal body plan into another animal body plan, you're going to have to change developmental gene regulatory network A into a completely novel developmental gene regulatory network to build that novel animal form.
That's not
true. But the one thing we know experimentally is these things cannot.
Oh, actually, well, hold on. I'll let him finish. I'm sorry.
Be altered without the destruction of the initial form. And once that form is destroyed, there's no more evolutionary development possible.
All right.
Now it turns out
now we can cut it. Okay, so he's totally lying again, or tragically misinformed again, because compare, for instance, 3 very closely related phyla. We'll call them arthropods, velvet worms, and tardigrades. The Hox genes that specify their body parts, they have the same Hox genes. All 3 of these, they're in the panarthropods. They're the super phylum called Panarthropoda. They all have the same Hox genes that are being used for different purposes, right? So the same Hox genes specify like the head region, the body region, the legs, the mouth parts, all this stuff. It's the same ones. So when he said everything, no, you don't. That's nonsense. That's abject nonsense. And I'm sure he knows that. But again, he gets paid 6 figures to say otherwise. This is just bogus. There's a really good paper on, it's like called something like the tardigrade compact body plan or something like that. And it goes into detail talking about how Hox genes are used, not just in the panarthropods, but also compares Hox genes in them against Hox genes in annelids. Because annelids also have the same Hox genes. They don't use them for all the same purposes, but they do have a lot of the same Hox genes. And he also said, when you change the Hox genes, that completely ruins the animal form. We also know that's totally wrong. Now, it can be the case that apparently our stream just got interrupted. Peter? Nestling?
Uh-oh, is Peter gone?
Still streaming? Guys, are we still streaming?
I don't know.
Hello out there?
We should
It
be
says stream unavailable. It says we got suspended for a policy violation.
Oh no.
See. This is
Well, that's not good.
This is why I put in the fair use at the start. So if you
All right. Well, so we're cutting it for today.
we should be
Thanks, YouTube.
We should be
All right,
back
we're cutting
on
it for today.
if hold on.
What is our policy violation?
So let's try this. Our policy violation is probably that they launched a strike.
Oh, wait.
Are
Hold
we-
on. It
oh.
says... Are we back? It says we're back. We're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Very weird. We're back on. Can everyone hear us?
I can hear you, but
Yeah,
I
so-
don't know if the
Can everybody...
audience
Well, I'm
can.
talking out in the live chat.
Yeah, we're back. We're back.
Yeah,
That was
it's
very bizarre.
no, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
So let me explain. This is why I put the fair use agreement at the start of this video, because I was afraid that something like this could happen. You should get an email or a mention from YouTube.
I did. I got an email.
Yeah. And what you need to do is launch an appeal that this is all under fair use, and you should be able to do this, because we're interrupting the video enough for it to be fair use, and it's a review, so it everything falls under the fair use agreement. And so if you look at the start of the video, you'll have the
It's not
articles.
saying anything on my channel about it.
No, it's probably the
It's not
stream.
saying anything on my channel about it.
The stream will probably still be up, but it will be cut out for just a few seconds. That is what sometimes happens. And if you then change what's on screen, then you're good to go to continue. But we're at the 2-hour mark anyway, so
We're at the 2-hour mark anyways. Huh.
yeah. What
All right. Well,
what I would
tell you
do
what,
is
folks, well, so we're gonna cut it anyways. So
yeah, I would reply to the email that you just got and say, listen, this is fair use, so I don't see where the problem is, because
well, it did not It doesn't say anything. It just says when the material is removed that it's good again. It doesn't say anything else.
Yeah, you should.
Well,
still,
that was weird.
You should still appeal it because there's no need to remove any material. Not if.
Okay, perhaps can we for next time can we just play the audio and do it like this, like without showing?
Yeah, can we just do the audio?
Won't make any difference. Yeah. Won't make any difference.
Really?
Yeah, because it's still the exact same show, and it will detect the audio as well as the video, so that won't make any difference at all. All you can do is appeal, and then probably within a week you should have.
Well, it doesn't say it doesn't say anything on my channel itself, so. No,
it doesn't. They just cut you out because of a policy violation, which would be a.
Well, we're gonna keep doing this until we go through this video because screw these guys.
Yes, I think that's what
anyway,
we should do.
We're gonna cut it for today because we're gonna cut it for today because we're basically at the 2-hour mark anyway, so that's fine.
And we covered 20 minutes.
Woo! Look at us, 20 minutes
of the 2 hours and 49 minutes that the show's long.
Oh man.
So
okay, alrighty. Well, all right. Well, so well, thank you everybody in the live chat for watching. Sorry about that. But we'll be back next week continuing with this, and we're gonna keep going through it because they can't stop us because we're using it under fair use.
Yes.
So they can kiss my butt.
There's no legal way they could stop us. I don't know if they're going to try, but yeah. Yeah, Dalton says they do better.
Everybody for watching.
Dalton says they do better at detecting audio than they do video, and that's true because the video isn't full screen, and usually that throws off their search algorithms that would detect a copy. If there's other things on screen, it will just not work that well. But I mean.
Yeah,
we can just try and do more about this.
Okay. Well, we'll revisit this next time. Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody who was in the live chat for watching. Appreciate all you guys. Thank you, Peter and Nestle, for coming here and joining me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, if I may, before we interrupt, I wanted to mention something about one interesting thing about. Network, or one interesting network that I know about is something called the AC/DC network. Not to be confused with the band, and it has the same name. But it's
part of the AC/DC network is close to where I live.
Yeah. But I think it refers to alternating current and direct current. It's basically a small network of 3 components, like 2 components. Interfere with each other. They inhibit each other's expression. A interferes with B and B interferes with A. But then you have another gene, C, where B promotes C and C promotes A. So this small network can do a lot of interesting stuff. Too many to mention here, so I'll just put a link to one paper about AC/DC for further study for those who are interested.
And Ian says
that's it.
And Ian says the thunderstruck. No, and Ian, that was what happened to Nestle's audio. That was thunderstruck.
Yeah, exactly. I don't hear. Yeah, I don't hear it myself, but I am sorry for that. Yeah,
that's okay. It's no problem. It's all good.
Things
right,
happen.
Thank you everybody for watching.
Things happen, Nestle.
I'm so sorry for that.
There's no way to avoid things happening. Which can I say one more thing, Jackson? This weekend, we have 2 shows planned on Ross' channel, Blasphemers Bible and Reading Joseph Smith. And if everything will work, then Arn is going to annoy all of us doing it from the beach in Cancun. So he will be he will be sitting on the beach during the show. And by the way, did you know what Cancun means?
What does it mean?
It means snake pit. Seeing that Arn recently got himself a new hobby and now has close to 50 snakes, he's in the exact right place.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, I'm curious.
All right.
See if we can make that work.
Yeah, I believe in you. All right, so we're gonna sign off. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Peter and Nestlig, for being here and assisting me with all this.
Anytime.
I appreciate it.
Always fun.
All right, so bye everybody.
Bye everyone. Oh.